Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of the Full Press NFL podcast. This time it is a post-Super Bowl edition of the show, and we have with us today, unfortunately, the representative of the team that came up just a little bit short, Braden Holecek, Chiefs Managing Editor. How are we doing about 16 hours from the Chiefs losing their chance at back-to-back Super Bowls?
It's obviously a crushing one just because we have not seen the Chiefs as a whole probably play this bad in a long time under Andy Reid. And I guess just talking with some Chiefs fans last night, if there's anything like positive about it, I guess is, they did get their ring last year. And, now it's not like 51 years since they last won one, but that's what makes the NFL so different than like, say, MLB or NHL. I mean, it's a year-to-year thing that's more competitive than just saying, okay, we got our one ring for this decade. Mm-hmm. So that's somewhat of a positive thing to look at it, but it's also, we know there's going to be a lot of big decisions to make. You talk about Sammy Watkins and Demarcus Robinson at receiver. And I know we'll touch on the offensive line a lot, but they're another team that's going to have to make, I think, some salary cap decisions as well. Frank Clark, Chris Jones, possibly Anthony Hitchens, maybe even Tyrann Mathieu are guys that I think you can look at their contracts being restructured or tinkered with a little bit. So a lot of big decisions to make, and obviously it comes off a crushing loss.
I don't think anyone will sit here and say that they're shocked that the Bucs won. I think going into this matchup, the Chiefs were for a lot of reasons favored, and that's not an issue. But no one necessarily would have been shocked that the Bucs won. It's just how they won. And you and I, along with Kyle Senras, spoke numerous times leading up to this game about some of the key matchups. And one of the things that kind of got underplayed a little bit, but we spoke about a lot, was the matchup on the line, and that is the Bucs defensive line versus the Chiefs offensive line. And you brought up a great statistic leading up to this game that this group together, the Chiefs starting offensive line, had only played 17 snaps together. And look, there was a lot of things that went wrong for the Chiefs. But if you're going to pinpoint one area that, just completely seemed maybe an easy choice to pick pregame as a problem, became that easy choice. Was that the key issue in this game? If you're going to boil it down to one main issue, was it just the absolute lack of protection and just really the domination on the Bucs' behalf?
Yeah, I think it just looking at some of the plays where Tampa Bay was able to get pressure naturally with four guys, and like the Chiefs even had some of those plays where they used extra numbers, like 7 guys, and like 4 Tampa Bay defenders were still getting through to Mahomes. So it's like, I think when you just look at that and how like easy it was for Tampa Bay, that's something that sticks out the most. And there was a funny stat that like, I think between the two quarterbacks, how many like yards they traveled or ran around during their dropbacks. I think Mahomes was like 498 yards and Brady was like 37. So there was a lot in this game where I think they were not prepared, because you have a guard in Andrew Wiley playing tackle, Mike Remmers, who, for his credit, I think did okay at parts of the season, but when you move him over to the blind side, that's a completely different issue for him. And I think what we talked about too for Tampa Bay is just the depth that they have on their defensive line. It's not just one guy, and Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul obviously played a great game. I was impressed with Ndamukong Suh, who I don't think we really gave as much credit to, maybe as Vita Vea going in. So Suh looked like the old Suh in this game. And I think it's just, I don't think you can point to necessarily one thing. I think it's just a team that, well-rounded wise, it wasn't prepared to play. But I think the offensive line, that's probably the biggest thing that sticks out going into the offseason for sure.
Yeah, look, when you lose a game 31-9, and again, your offense doesn't score a touchdown, so on and so forth, there's a lot of issues, and look, a lot of them were caused by the Bucs, and it happened early on. The coverage, we talked about the first game a lot. 200 plus yards from Tyreek Hill in that first quarter in Week 12. 71 total yards this game, and look, let's face it, a good portion of those yards came in. I don't want to say garbage time because there was still technically a chance, but it came towards the end of the game where the Bucs were maybe playing a little bit more softer to keep the ball going and the clock moving. So, Patrick Mahomes. Okay, so going into this game, we and everyone had talked about the matchup at quarterback. The young goat versus the old goat, and if anyone knows me, I hate the use of the word goat to begin with. I think it's just been overdone to absolute exhaustion, and I feel like throwing up in my mouth every time I hear it. But I hope that from this loss, I think everyone hopefully has a better perspective on Patrick Mahomes' career. And I'm not trying to say this in a negative light, and hopefully you can kind of contrast this from a Chiefs standpoint. I think in a way it can be unfair to him to have already tried to elevate him to what Brady has done. And again, that's not saying he's not able to achieve and carve out his own great quarterbacking career. It's just at such a young age to try to project such a long, accomplished career in front of him, I think it throws off the coverage of him. So I think after this loss, I think a lot of people might take a step back and say, you know what? I believe personally that he's the best young quarterback that we have. I mean, we talk about Justin Herbert this year, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield, all that stuff. I think Patrick Mahomes is clearly a notch above those guys. I think he has some ways to go before he kind of, gets to the level that I think some people wanted to already put him in, but that's not a knock on him. Again, a lot of that comes through time. Do you agree that, hopefully, yes, this was a bad game from his point of view. The image of him flying horizontally and throwing that football, again, I can't get my mind off that, and again, that tells me something about how special he is. But at the same time, do you agree that the coverage of Patrick Mahomes might take a step back a little bit, and that maybe in the big picture we get a better appreciation for what he's doing and what he's accomplishing right now?
Yeah, and I think what kind of stuck out to me last night too, even more, is just the fact that it is, the ultimate team sport, and Mahomes is kind of just falling in those lines of what we've seen with Rodgers and Breeze and some other good quarterbacks. Is they can't do it all on their own, and I think it's just something where with Mahomes himself, I think there's some stuff that he's still not obviously developed in yet, reading defenses, and I think that's been part of the approach Andy Reid's kind of tried to take with him. And I think there's a lot that sometimes, whether it's Mahomes or just the Chiefs as a whole, I think they're stuck on, beating teams one way. The AFC Championship game, they were able to hit on those shorter passes, and that kind of went away in the Super Bowl, which surprised me. So, but yeah, going back to just Mahomes himself, I think there's a lot that, just from an individual standpoint, I think it's crazy to think that, we kind of put him in the light of being able to overcome turf toe and then that knee injury last year, to just see, how highly regarded people put him there, to come through those injuries and and everything he's already dealt with health wise. I think that already speaks to where people have put his career. But yeah, I think the biggest thing as far as improvements goes, it's just, I think it's going to take a lot of just the fundamental part of the game and the little things, and that's something that I think is more achievable under a guy like Andy Reid. You look at some of the quarterbacks that he's kind of helped during their careers, like Donovan McNabb and Kevin Cobb and guys like that. I think those are just the things that's going to have to be sharpened, so to speak, for Mahomes to kind of reach the level that, some people were putting him at earlier on.
Yeah, and look, I also think the fact, it's unfortunate that Eric Bieniemy did not get a job, but the fact that he's going to come back for yet another season, I think is great for Patrick Mahomes. And really, I think the pressure the pressure too of not being the Super Bowl champion will help. It'll help the development and the growth of some of these players because, look, let's face it, on top of just the normal pressure of getting everyone's best game, you're still going to get that. I mean, the Chiefs aren't going away. They're favored for next season, and they very well may be back. But, you know, as the defending champion, you get that little extra from every single team. And again, there's this added pressure, especially for a team that just won for the first time. And look, let's go back to Tom Brady's first Super Bowl championship. They missed the playoffs the next year. They started hot, and then they just lost focus. And this is rare when you're talking about Tom Brady, and very rare because it's only happened once in his career. They lost focus, and they didn't even make the playoffs. They finished 9-7. Obviously, they used that to help, you know, okay, we screwed up. Let's go on, and they ended up winning 2 straight Super Bowls after that, and the rest is history. But, you know, Patrick Mahomes has already accomplished more just about than some of the great quarterbacks of this generation. And that's not an insult to Aaron Rodgers, but we see how difficult it is for anyone to get back to the Super Bowl, save for Tom Brady. Aaron Rodgers hasn't been back in 10 years. Drew Brees hasn't been back for even longer. Drew Brees is about to retire. Aaron Rodgers has a few good years left. I do believe that the Chiefs will get back eventually. Again, the combination of Mahomes' youth, Reed's relative youth, and the coaching staff and the people that are on this team right now, I do think that they will get back. I still think that they're the best team in the AFC. But I think not having that pressure of being the champion is going to allow this team to grow. And look, sometimes losing can be a catalyst to success. And as Chiefs fans, as someone who covers the Chiefs, you know, be it a regular season game and not a Super Bowl, go back to 2014. The Chiefs versus the Patriots. The Patriots get absolutely run out of the stadium on Monday Night Football. And, you know, the proclamations of Brady this, Brady that, the Patriots are done. Speaking specifically about the player Brady, he has gone on to win 4 of the last 7 Super Bowls since then. Mahomes and this group, they can do a similar thing. They can use this loss as a way of saying, okay, look, it's not as easy as maybe we thought it was going to be. And I'm not saying every player felt that way, but do you think that maybe that played a role in how this team ultimately, I don't want to say didn't show up for the Super Bowl, but they kind of got their teeth kicked in a little bit?
Yeah, and I think it kind of just it goes back to something that Travis Kelce, I think, said on the Shannon Sharp podcast too, how kind of difficult it was for them to be patient during the regular season. Mm-hmm. And you kind of mentioned, you know, the Patriots after their first Super Bowl win. The Chiefs were just clearly not as good this year as they were last year, despite, you know, 14-1 year with the starters. We saw them the last, 9 games of the year only win by, you know, single digits. So you're not going to get, obviously, 45 to 10 wins every week. But when you see that and see some of the struggles that were there, that was just something new for this team. And I think that's what made the playoff games against Cleveland and Buffalo so interesting, how they were able to mask some of those. But yeah, when you have a loss like this in the Super Bowl, I think it takes you back to, I think, just the NFL as a whole, knowing it's a year by year thing, and knowing that, you know, the biggest thing that you have to come from this is, you know, you got to try to get back to where you were the year before, knowing that I think the Chiefs are obviously, like you said, built to win right now. You look at some of the contract extensions they had this past summer with Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. And even some of the money that's tied into Frank Clark. I think they're focused, obviously, on these next few years. And I think a loss like this makes it a little bit easier to come out, you know, with a less of a target maybe on their back, and kind of go back to that hunter mentality a little bit.
Well, and if you go back to, you know, in a very, very similar, albeit not the similar score. Well, I mean, obviously the Seahawks ended up scoring more, but the Seahawks-Broncos Super Bowl, there were a lot of similarities, a lot of parallels to what we saw yesterday. But, you know, for a positive outlook on it, the Broncos obviously rebounded and came back better. They got better. They found out through that game where they really needed to improve. And perhaps this is a signal to the Chiefs because, look, it's apparent they need a better running game from the running backs. That was, I know they fell behind rather early because they did go up 3-0, obviously 7-3, and then, by the end of the second half, the running game was just by the end of the second quarter, the running game was non-existent, and I don't know if that was necessarily by choice. I just don't know if they had the players capable of carrying the load. Do you agree, or was it just a bad game from the running backs?
Yeah, I think it was kind of just the time of the game and knowing that the offensive line was pretty much almost like dead by that point and worn down. I think that knowing guys that weren't there that they had either last year or earlier in the season, like Laurent Duvernay-Tardif or Kelechi Osemele, I think those guys not being there also made it more difficult to run just because of the physicality that they bring to the table compared to guys that are more of the athletic version of the offensive line, like Wiley and guys like that. So, I think it's a mix of both just because even though Clyde Edwards-Helaire had some good games this year, he never really got rolling. And I know it's hard to do in an offense where Andy Reid loves to throw the ball a lot, but we just never really saw him kind of get in that groove as the lead back. Injuries kind of came into play. They bring Le'Veon Bell in, of course, too, and that kind of hurts his snap count. So I think it was a mixture of both of those in this one.
So moving forward, obviously the teams that make it to the Super Bowl, the offseason's just a few weeks shorter than everyone else. So you kind of got to, pick up the pieces pretty quickly, move on. If you were the Chiefs front office, well, one, you'd be paid a lot more than any of us combined. But if you were working in the Chiefs front office, what are a move or two that you must make for this team to get back to the Super Bowl? What signing, extension, trade, what have you? What move would you make? Moves.
I think just starting with the offensive line, I think you got to at least double down in the draft, if not triple down. The free agent class to me, I think is better suited for the Chiefs, maybe at wide receiver. A guy I've kind of touted a little bit, I guess, for this free agent class that maybe more of a low cost addition for a team like the Chiefs would be Marvin Jones. So I think offensive line and wide receiver is going to be their two biggest needs. But I also think if you look at the defense, adding a pass rusher to kind of account for what Chris Jones and Frank Clark can do, or at least Jones, I think just adding, that extra pass rush presence off the edge, as they've said, you can never have enough pass rushers, and they obviously felt that force in the Super Bowl game. So those are kind of the big three needs to me. I think Brett Veach is going to have to be pretty creative, though, with the salary cap. We'll see what that settles in at following the COVID-affected season. But I think it's just going to have to be an offseason where they're more creative than they were last year. They were able to kind of manipulate that salary cap a little bit. But I think the questions this year are going to be a lot more difficult, so to speak.
Well, we'll be interested in tuning into your coverage to find out what the answer to those questions are, Braden. Thank you very much for joining us, and I appreciate you taking the time, especially after a tough defeat in the Super Bowl. I've been there myself as a Patriots fan. I've experienced it 4 times, actually. So it doesn't get easy, but again, it creates a lot more work for you in the offseason. I'll just put it that way. Let them know, everyone out there, where they can find your work and what do you have coming up.
Yeah, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Braden Holecek 9. The Full Press Coverage Chiefs Twitter account is at FPC_Chiefs. And my first piece after the Super Bowl loss was just kind of looking at the offensive line and just kind of revisiting, from the offseason and the regular season, how they've kind of used Band-Aids to cover up their biggest weakness. And then, that dam finally burst in the Super Bowl. I should have more draft profile content this week. One offensive lineman, Creed Humphrey from Oklahoma, will be my next one there. So stay tuned for that. And also going to be starting a new series soon, Tuesdays and Thursdays, called This or That, where I kind of look at hypothetical questions. What would players like Priest Holmes or Jamal Charles, choosing between those guys, if you wanted to put them on the Chiefs team of 2020, or even as we get further into the offseason, kind of doing like which wide receiver would you rather have from the free agent class, and kind of looking at the realistic options as well as far as contract and salary cap stuff goes. So stay tuned for all of that. It's going to be not just for the Chiefs, a wild off season. So really excited to see how things kind of change in the NFL landscape.
Well, I'm pretty sure Priest Holmes or Jamal Charles might have helped a little bit last night, but let's not dwell on that. Thank you, Braden, and we look forward to talking to you once again. Give us a follow on Twitter at FullPressNFL. I am at IGLEN31, and of course, everyone, download and listen to the show on the Full Press Coverage app. It's available. It's free. It's on the Google Play Store and the Apple Store. We will talk to you soon. Have a great day.